We're at a point in healthcare where we expect several things to happen. 1, we want consumers to be informed. 2, we like it when they own their own health information. And 3, we want them to drive healthcare decisions rather than the old days of just waiting for doctor's orders. The problem is people are being deluged by health information. Seriously, right? And this trend will only continue to grow with new services launching every day to help people essentially manage their own health records, right down to every single test result, manage their own heart rates, everything. So how can we help them understand all of this new technology and new health information at their fingertips without being overwhelmed? Our panel has some great ideas and examples for us to learn from. Our moderator is DCRainmaker. Is this your first time at CES? Yeah, awesome. Driving force, or should I say the biking, running, swimming force behind DCRainmaker.com. DCRainmaker produces the most in-depth reviews and analysis of sports technology products on the web today. The site attracts more than 8 million page views a year, having quickly become the go-to place for sports technology. It's all yours, Ray.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. As kind of alluded to, DCRainmaker is basically a blog I run for sports technology and health and fitness. So I focus on the technology side. So coming out of that last panel there, a lot of discussion around the technology piece and how consumers make sense of it. And that's kind of what I try to write a lot about, and how consumers, whether they're Olympic gold medalists or they're somebody that's trying to lose 400 pounds, can use that technology and better their life or better their goals. So what we want to do here is to talk through a lot of the challenges that face that industry today and face the consumers as well. So I want to first give the 4 panelists a moment to talk about who they are, what companies they represent, and the products they're talking about here at CES. Start off with Chris here.
Hi, I'm Chris Fickle. I'm Director of Telemedicine Business Development for A&D Medical. And at this year's CES, we're part of the AMP Plus Pavilion and showing wireless blood pressure monitors, weight scales, and activity monitors, and how that data can be part of a meaningful solution.
My name is Mike Stashak. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Wahoo Fitness. Wahoo Fitness connects smartphones to the home health and fitness markets. So if you run, bike, go to the gym, or want to measure your blood pressure or weight in your house and get that data into your cell phone, we have a hardware and software solution that allows you to do that.
Hi, my name is Ian Andes, President of 4Eyes, and what we're showing at CES this year is we're launching a new product called Sport Eyes, which is a device that attaches to virtually any pair of sunglasses and allows you to monitor that data in a very simplistic fashion. What do you learn as a kid? Red's bad, green's good, yellow's in between. Through a series of multicolored LEDs, we'll guide you to your target zone, whether you're trying to increase your anaerobic fitness, fulfill on your New Year's resolution and just lose some weight. We'll help guide you to that target, and we'll also give you audio feedback. The side benefit of this product is it'll allow you to keep your eyes on the road, so you don't have to look away to get your data from a wristwatch or a head unit.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Karl-Johan Dahlstrom. I'm heading up the Developer Relations Department at Sony Ericsson, or actually soon to become Sony Mobile Communications. And here at CES, we announced 2 new phones. Well, actually it was 4, 2 for Japanese market as well. But the main focus was on Xperia S and Xperia Ion. Xperia Ion is with AT&T, and it's our first LTE product. So why I'm here then is that I've been driving force with all the different partners around the active and lifestyle services for our phones. And the commonality between all the 4 phones that we announced here is they all use or have the ANT Plus enabler, which has become one of the crucial parts when it comes to the heart rate monitoring and the health part, and working with all these partners as well to build great services on our devices. Beside that, we also announced smartwatch, an intelligent watch for you to run as a second screen for your phone when you don't want to pick it up from your pocket. Perfect for your active lifestyle, daily work. And also we announced a smart wireless headset, Bluetooth headset, streaming MP3, both from the headset itself or streaming from your phone. I think we have any more announcements as well, but I should stop there maybe.
Okay, no problem. So I think one of the challenges of the devices, and I talked about this in the last session as well, is that there's so much data being given from these devices now, and it used to be simple, right? You had time and distance, and you had heart rate, and very basic metrics that a large portion of the active population understood. Heart rate's still a bit mysterious for those that are just getting into sport. But now you've got a lot of new sensor types out there, right? You're measuring power on a bicycle. You got the Basis watch now, which is measuring skin temperature, ambient temperature, galvanic response, all these different areas. How do consumers make sense of all this, and what responsibility is of the company? And I know, Ian, you're doing a lot of work with that sensor data today. How do you see that going forward and helping the consumers that purchasing your products?
Great. Well, I know that from a 4eyes perspective, our entire goal is to simplify that process for the consumer. We joke around all the time that we're getting so much data that my coach needs a coach to interpret it. So just general background, almost everybody in the company has either done an Ironman or some type of triathlon. We're all physically active, and we're designing products that we ourselves want. So, for us in a heads-up display environment, pitch the company for a second, obviously we want to increase the safety. But from interpreting the data, we want to simplify as much as possible. I mean, most people don't know a V dot versus anaerobic threshold versus what's the best place to be into to just simply lose weight. So we're trying to take all the technology from all the engineers and all these great companies that are designing great ways to measure data, simplify it, and then by the time it gets to the consumer, help them achieve their goals in the absolute simplest way. You're in the green zone, you're doing exactly what you want to achieve it. You're in the red zone, you're either working a little too hard, working a little too little, and we can take that data from all kinds of wireless communications. Right now we're based on ANT+, so we can do heart rate, power, speed, cadence, pace, and really simplify the process for the consumer.
And Chris, from your perspective, working more on kind of some of the devices that trend towards the medical side a bit, do you see the same challenges there, or with talking with physicians and whatnot, you get some of that feedback through them instead?
Yeah, on the, I guess on the medical side, there's two areas. There's the chronic care, disease management piece, and those patients are typically enrolled and basically forced to comply with therapy. If they don't take their blood pressure, if they don't take their rate reading, somebody's picking up the phone and calling them. The other side is more on the wellness side, and that's where you have all the data coming in, but how do you keep that person engaged and motivated to continue doing these right things? And that's the challenge that all these providers have today. The software can be great, the data can be simple, but if they don't somehow motivate that person to continue walking, to watching their weight, doing all those things, all the technology in the world is not going to have any benefit.
One of a lot of the technology today is all reactive in nature, right? So you've gone out for a bike ride or a run, and you're told, here's how far I went, or here's how fast I went, and here's what I did. There are very, 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 very few devices in the market today that tell you what to do next, right? I think within the sports technology world, or within a lot of the commonplace health products out there today, the only one I kind of off the top of my head is Zeo, right, which is a sleep monitoring device that monitors your sleep on a day-to-day basis and then tells you, here's what you should be doing next based on what has happened in the last few days. As you look and develop products going forward, what part of that becomes something that you're looking to offer to consumers for fee or for free, or where do you see that dividing line there? That could be, looks like Ian, like you got a...
That's not an easy one. I mean, it depends on the model of the company, I guess. For us, there's a lot of things that we're working on specifically to help on that kind of stuff. We're talking before about how do you make it fun, how do you keep people motivated, how do you get them that data, and then, I guess going back to the question, how do you charge them for it? That way you can sustain your business model, right? I think for us, being a hardware company, that's our priority. Once you have the tools, and for us, like SportEyes is the centerpiece of the ecosystem. You work with other companies who are really, really good at what they do. You work with some of those companies to get the data, integrate the data into your ecosystem. And if there's a bunch of bonuses, if there's extra stuff, of course, there's going to be fees just so you can maintain yourself. I don't think I'm actually answering the question.
No. So Ian, okay, go for it.
No, I mean, I think, I would love to get to a spot where we can tell a person where they're trying to lose weight, become better at fitness, or avoid bad habits that improve their health, what they should be doing next. But I think that it goes back to the first question. I don't think as an industry we are where we need to be today yet, right? And it's due to two reasons. One, accessibility to data, right? We don't even have standards that speak to each other. So whether you're on a phone, in a computer, you're on a piece of paper, none of those different pieces and parts talk to another, so you can't share your data very easily. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. And then two, it's still not easy to understand. So I'm a cancer survivor. I walked around for 7 months during chemotherapy carrying a bag full of data. And I couldn't understand a damn thing in that data. And so, we're getting to the point where we can provide data in an easy to understand piece, such as red, yellow, green. But until we get to a point where we know what red means and we know what green means, and then we have a very concrete hierarchy so we can dive deep under red. Well, I'm in red. What does that mean? Does it mean I'm not sleeping well? Does it mean I'm not eating well? Does it mean I'm not exercising well? Until we actually get to someone where we can make that data accessible, we can bring it together and make it easy to understand, but also have the depth behind it. I don't think we can get to a spot where we can tell someone what they need to do. And I think we're going to get there, but I think it's still a long way away, unfortunately.
So that brings up a good point. You talk about data integration and getting those ties together. And we've seen a lot of attempts at data integration, a lot of attempts at data siloing for healthcare and fitness-related data. Obviously, probably the biggest bust of that would be Google Health, right? Over the last year, in terms of that falling apart. How do you look at some of the other silos that are out there today, and what's going to make them successful going forward that failed Google Health? You talk about Health Graph, for example, right, is an option. What is, from your perspective, as somebody who's working on the data side of it, what are the challenges there today, and what has to be fixed to make that happen?
We're talking to me?
Yeah.
No, I think that the main challenge right now is we're very siloed. It's exactly what you said. You've got sport and fitness data in a silo. You've got home health medical data in a silo. You have sleep data in a silo, and it's all based on devices. And these APIs are coming out that allow people to speak to one another, but no one's taken all of these data from these different silos and put the umbrella on it that says, okay, this is your comprehensive 360-degree view of your life. And it's probably, you got regulatory issues, you have cost issues, you have interoperability issues. And until we solve all of those issues, we're not going to be able to provide consumers that full umbrella of what their life looks like. And I think, hopefully there's no one from Fitbit in the audience, but they had a great marketing message when they launched. Measures your life, and and it did a fairly good job of doing what it said it was going to do. But measuring your life, I don't think we actually have the full ability to take data from home health, from your doctor, from your sport fitness life, how many calories you consume, and your sleep, and bring that into a comprehensive view for the user yet.
So would it be more efficient going forward? Right now, all these different health consolidation type platforms are driven by companies, right? They're driven by interests that are serving that particular company, and then they try to get partners to latch onto them. Does it make sense that the industry evolve a bit and have some sort of group that can manage that, right? In the same way that you have ANT Plus or the Bluetooth SIG managing some of the interactions there, is that the direction that things have to ultimately go? And that Chris or...
Well, I think the closest we have to that today is the payer, right? They see more of this data than anybody. Every time we go to the doctor, the pharmacy, the hospital, they have loads of data. And more of those, well, I think they all have some type of disease management program. More and more of them are launching wellness programs and starting to create views for the user to actually see some of that data, at least the wellness piece. So I think, getting back to Mike's point, I think what's going to drive this forward is the payer actually driving it forward. They have probably the biggest vested interest in this besides ourselves.
And that brings up an interesting point as somebody buying devices. I think one of the other challenges, aside from the silos, ignoring the silos even for a moment, is that a lot of the devices tie you into services either permanently or temporarily, either for service or even for free. You just can't get the data out of. What do you see, and maybe from your perspective, as far as what the baseline requirements of a device should be as far as exportability, right? We want to avoid data islanding, or the whole concept of, I put data into something and I can't ever get it back out again. What do you encourage the developers that you work with today to offer?
I mean, if you look at our phones based on Android, it's an open system. And that allows you to download the service you want to run. There are several different fitness applications or fitness services running. I mean, we are driving the enabler. And the enabler we put into the hands of the developer or the service makers. And the service makers create something built on our phones. Where we see it, we talk to our marketing department to see how can we promote this? How can we make this really good for our phones? And then we come back to, again, what we make money on from our side is by selling phones. And the better the services are, the more attractive the phones are. So of course, we work with developers to create as good services as possible for the phones. One of the lead words we have been having for quite a few years now is user experience. Everything boils down to user experience. How do they, because the technology makes a lot of this data, I mean, the data was probably available a few years ago back as well, but it's been even easier to get the data now. I don't have to twist my arm 3 times or whatever to get my heartbeat, or if you see a little bit what I mean. Now we have LTE standards coming up with continuously connected devices over a really high bandwidth with really low latencies. What can we do with that? I mean, the technology is evolving and making all this data even more and easier to access. And services will evolve along with that. That's how we see it when we work with partners. And you will never get it right the first time. I mean, there will always be continuous evolvement in all these different services when it evolves around the data as well. And coming back again, I mean, we should not lock the customer into the one solution. There's other solutions that are probably better at different things that would meet that customer's need. So we have a quite open stance to all of this, where we talk to several different fitness partners or health partners to really build up the active lifestyle proposition around our phones that we want. So it's a quite broad question, and I don't really see that it should not be locked in. It should be up to the consumer to choose.
Okay. And what do you see, from your perspective, offering a hardware device that's sort of the entry point for data into it? Where do you see the baseline that a hardware company should provide data out of, right? In other words, what is a base amount of information that you would expect to provide for free that a user could go ahead and export out and take with them? Is it the analysis piece? Is it the raw data itself? In other words, how do you serve that up, right, at the end of the day to that? And that's maybe something that Mike can talk to. I know, Mike, you've done a ton of work as well within the Wahoo app about data types, right, and exporting. It's probably one of the best examples of phone apps out there that literally just gives up a cruise ship buffet of options of ways to take that data out. Where do you see kind of the minimum requirements being for devices?
I mean, Wahoo Fitness is built on an open platform. So for people not familiar in the audience about Wahoo Fitness, is that we have a bunch of hardware that allows you to get data from external sensors into an iPhone. And we opened up that API to as many app partners as possible, and we have 100 app partners that can actually use our hardware to get data into an iPhone, and then they can take that data and do whatever they want to do. We also
just add an Android phone as well.
Yes, and yes, Android too. Yes, sorry. Wow, these green shoes taste great. So, one of the things that we believe is, at least I believe, and Wahoo Fitness believes, is that you need to make that data accessible, and you need to make that data portable. And it's really not what the data is that's valuable. It's what you do with the data that makes it valuable. So a great example of that is, I'll give you 2 examples. There's a website out there called Strava in the cycling industry, in the sport fitness market. And it takes ride data or running data, and it does cool things with it. And to me, that's why they extract value from consumers, is because what they do with that data, it makes people want to put data in that repository and compare it to other people. In the corporate wellness market, you look at a corporate wellness market, and everyone wants to give their users pedometers so that people can lower their health insurance bills with their company. And it's not the number of steps that matter for the corporate wellness program. It's the corporate wellness programs that take those step data and they turn it into cool contests, right, to get people walking more and to bring that competitive pieces around it. It's what they do with the data that what makes it valuable, and why the company pays that corporate wellness program dollars to administer it for them. So I think that, as companies remove their locks on data, and I think that's where they're going because they're saying, well, it's not the data that's valuable, it's what we do with it. I think that's where the consumer goes to a better place.
It's good.
Oh, sorry. I mean, because you're asking a really good question. And it's something that I know we struggle with, and it's something that I think a lot of corporations struggle with. Because what you're really asking is, who do you want to be as a corporation and as a company? And who do you want to be that for? And I know that for something, our goal is, again, simplification, make it more accessible, make it easier for people to understand and interpret quickly. Are you doing that for a novice who has no experience whatsoever? Are you doing it for, a great example for us, we had a wife call us who was like, I cannot allow my husband's heart to go over 160 beats per minute because he just had a heart attack? Or are you doing it for somebody, and there's a lot of them there, and I know you do it as well. You're doing it for the Ironman who's pretty adept at really knowing a lot of what's going on in the body, from caloric intake to what's your VO2 max. And again, some of those terms that until I started racing, I didn't know what they were. But it really does come down to who do you want to be and who do you want to be it for. So, even for us, something that we're looking at is being completely agnostic. We want to work with everybody. We're primarily, 50% of the concept is a safety device that came from me looking at my data, and it's embarrassing, right? I hit a speed I've never hit before, and I fell on my face because I was so engaged at my watch, like, wow, a 7-minute mile. Next thing you know, blood everywhere, and I fell on my face and banged myself up because the data was so critical. So it really comes down to simplification. How do you present that? I think it's up to the consumer. We want to build products that the consumer wants. We want feedback from the consumer. And I think that if you can get it, if you can build a system, and this isn't easy, right? But if you can build a system that can supply solutions for somebody who's at least moderately versed in what they're trying to achieve, and then cross-leverage that technology, the cascading waterfall effect, into a complete novice, like you were saying before, engage them, grab them, make it fun, and then promote them up through the food chain into like more of an experienced athlete or consumer, health individual. Looking back on what I just said, I think that's the responsibility of the company. How do you attract the novice? How do you educate? And then eventually, one of our goals, and I think it's from a lot of people here, what that's going to do is lead into having the consumer drive the corporations to supplying the products that are going to better them.
So you mentioned a moment ago kind of the consumer. There's really, I see two different types of consumers of devices in this space. One is that somebody who may be training, such as yourself, right? And your device attempts to prevent falling flat in your face, for example. But there's also cars. The other scenario you talked about, right? Which is somebody, and I get a lot of questions, the exact same thing. I cannot have this heart rate exceed a given value. And the devices that doctors may give may not really fit the bill for what that consumer wants to live with day to day. And they see a ton of options on the market today that kind of work, but not quite really work. Yep. Where do you see that bridge where the cutting edge devices that are used for training that could technically serve the same goal, but aren't there yet today for medical oriented use?
Yeah, it's fascinating because our whole initial strategy on our product launch was strictly the athlete. Right, the guy who really knew what he was doing, wanted to measure how much power he was outputting on his bike and, really focus on that. And then all of a sudden we started launching and we got feedback. And there was a huge amount of people that came up to us with all these other ideas we never even considered. It was probably a fault that we were very myopic in our initial view. And then it's a matter of really opening that up for them to be able to go in and interpret it.
We had almost a similar experience with our active lifestyle hero product, Xperia Active. It was very much targeting, like you're saying, more the fitness and health audience. But what we have seen since we launched it became hugely successful in a few countries, and it's selling here in the US in retail. But what we have seen, or the feedback we're also getting, is that it's also for people who how do we put it? Worryless. They want to be worryless. They don't want to have to care about the phone. Xperia Active, just for your information, is IP67. So you can have water and dust proof, and it can be in water for 30 minutes or something like that. So, and I know you have done a review on it as well, right? But I think that was really interesting to see that we're actually attracting a really big crowd of people that even if it was targeting first, like this is an active phone, it was a lot of other segments as well that saw a lot of benefits with the preferences for a device like that. Just like you say, it appealed to the wireless people that really, if I'm out in the garden, I don't want it to fall into the dirt or have to care about if it falls into the dirt or anything like that. So it's interesting you have a similar experience as well.
Yep. And it's funny you mentioned it. That's kind of, I have the phone, and it's one of the things that it's the ancillary benefits that are kind of interesting to me, right? It's that I can go somewhere and not have to worry about the little things, not have to worry about getting caught in a rainstorm. You know, I don't plan on going with swimming with it, though I have and it works. But I don't have to worry about those edge cases, and that's, I think, what's nice over a conventional phone. Going back to the medical thing a little bit, I think it's interesting that a lot of the devices now are capturing so much data, and they're doing it so quickly, and they're creating such big data stores that the consumer, of course, is overloaded. But also, when the consumer goes and takes that information sometimes to a medical professional, they're also overloaded because there's just so much information there that they're either not expecting or they're not really sure what to do with at that point, or it's not even in the right format for them to understand, right? It doesn't meet those needs. Where do you see some of the challenges today in that field coming from the medical side?
Well, I think the first example I'll throw out is more on that chronic care disease management side. And more often than not, the software that is being used to manage the patients by exception only. So if readings come in and fall within a certain range, then the caregiver really does nothing. It's only when those readings come in and they're outliers that a clinician is picking up the phone, making sure the patient's taking their medications, following therapy, and so on. And so I think that the same thing is going to filter down into more of the wellness programs. Today, you're seeing a lot of dashboards. Great, you hit 10,000 steps today, or you're getting average blood pressure readings or trends graphs, and that's about it. But I think there'll be more of this. Maybe you can create, or your spouse can create those ranges that if a reading falls outside of that, there's some type of alert to somebody.
Then it becomes more of a service. It's built on top of the data again.
Well, it could be, or it could be that I'm looking at my parents' information.
Yes.
My parents live 4 hours away, and at any time I can go on and see their data, or if there is an outlier reading, I'll get a message. And so I can pick up the phone and call my mom and dad and see what's going on. So it could be as simple as that as well. But again, to your point, it could be a service situation.
Yeah, because you said it was so much data, so it's hard for one person to really digest it. And I guess then it will be a service that is built on top of that helps other people digest it.
And that's actually an interesting. Okay.
No, I mean, those services, what you're talking about, are apps.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So if you look at the iFitness aisle in the North Hall, right, there's, let's say, 50 companies that all have their own device. If you take that to the app world, there's 50,000 companies, right, that all have an app, and apps are like flavors of ice cream. I mean, there's unlimited amount of apps to do unlimited types of services, whether it's a small market service or whether it's a big market service. So as you talk about kind of the medical data and home health, right, and you talk about my caregiver is 4 hours away because that's, my dad had a stroke, right? I live 4 hours away from him. I want to know that he got his X amount of steps on his way to his rehab, or blood glucose. You want to know that your elderly father's checking his blood glucose levels, right? The great saying is that there is going to be an app for that. And if you let the data be accessible and you let the data will be easy to understand because someone's going to create an app.
Right.
It's interesting, I was talking with Robert McRae from the session before a little bit about there's such a divide between the health and fitness side and the sports side, right? Of a big umbrella that's there covering all these devices. That the sport people really don't understand the health and fitness side, and the health and fitness folks don't really understand the sports side, but the technologies are so similar. In fact, in some cases, they're the exact same products, just catering to different needs. Looking from your perspective, Ian, how do you take a product that obviously 4eyes is definitely targeted towards the athlete today? There's really not a lot of question about that. Like you said, it's targeted towards somebody who's out there and going and have fun riding for 5 hours on a windy day. How do you convert that into something that can maybe apply to somebody who's just looking to get healthy and not necessarily looking to ride for 5 hours?
Really good marketing people. No, but I mean, wow, I mean, aside from the obvious of building up the company, getting the revenue, being able to do the marketing, get the engineers, get the research, and all that stuff, because that all goes into it, right? I think it's a matter of having the forevision to be able to design a product that's going to be able to leverage to begin with. There's a lot of talk about some products being able to achieve aspirational acquisition status. So in other words, if the really big guys have it, and they're the ones that everyone looks up to, then everybody else is going to want to have that as well. Specifically going into something like health, sometimes you come up with something where it just naturally fits and it happens organically. We've got a lot of people contacting us and saying, look, I can't read the numbers on my watch. I had a visual impairment. I had a stroke. I had a heart attack. I've reached that age where my vision ain't what it used to be. And it was being said before, and then that's where stuff comes in, where you get other people to help you. You get the apps. You get the guys to go in and say, okay, all I need is the hardware. You supply it, but then we're going to write some code for it. We're going to go in and change what it's already doing just to signal, hey, it's time to take your pill. Hey, your heart rate's a little too high, you're working out too hard. And simplification, because I think one of the core things I'm hearing in a lot of the questions, there is data overload. There is so much data. There is so much, what I joke around with is I try and stay as far away from thinking like an engineer as I can, because I'm not. Because it complicates things, and there's so much. And I know that from an athlete side, we get so hung up on heart rate. Is 162 beats per minute really, really that much more important than 165? It's not, because you get to within that threshold where that's within your goal of what you want to do. The same thing in like recovery. The same thing for, there's so many different areas that you can get into, but as long as you're getting to within that threshold, that's where the simplification comes in.
And it's interesting because in a sports scenario, that's important, right? Yeah. But then you flip it to a health scenario, and it goes back to the case of you cannot have a person exceed a given heart rate. And if it does, what happens? And that's, I think, what's interesting. You talk about the cell side of it, right? Where you could do real-time alerting, and you can start integrating those devices and such that when that heart rate strap does go above an elevated heart rate for a given period of time, maybe that's a cause for alert to somewhere else. Like looking at some of the work that you've done on the phone side, where do you see that going forward with more real-time monitoring? In other words, how do you see that area evolving?
First of all, I think people always have their phone with them, right? And if a lot of transaction processing companies get their way, or payment technology companies, and your phone will be your wallet. So you won't have your wallet and your phone, you just have your phone. I think that unfortunately we're not working closely with a lot of people that are doing the always-on monitoring, but I think that's the place where it has to go. It has to go to the phone, just because it's something that people always have with them. And beyond just collecting data, the phone has many other pieces of functionality that allow you to act on that data. So, for instance, you have always-on internet with the phone. You have the ability to call someone. You have the ability to make a sound. And if you just have a device on yourself that's collecting data, you don't necessarily have that ability. So the use case for that is if an elderly person falls, right, you can use the phone to call for help. Or if you reach a certain level of your heart rate, it can give you an alarm and say, please sit down or do whatever needs to be. So I think that we're huge proponents of the phone and having the phone be the kind of the brains and the computer behind that. And I think that as we think up use cases, that there's going to be a developer that will see value in building an app to go do that. And I hate to sound like a broken record on the app, but I think that the app is really, there's going to be an app for every different type of use case that we can have, right? And that's, whether it's the sport fitness market or whether it's the home health market, I think the apps are going to really drive a lot of those use cases.
You've got on your wrist there the new smartwatch, correct?
Yes, that's the new smartwatch.
And kind of integrating the whole idea of a independent device with a cell phone. Can you talk a little bit where you guys see that market going?
You mean that the phone becomes a bridge almost? I mean,
Yep.
You can connect a lot of different accessories to the phone through all the different technologies. You can even connect it via the connectivity over LTE or through the internet, through the cloud, different services. It depends on if you want a direct connection or almost go like an indirect connection. With a direct connection then through ANT+, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, There are so many different technologies to connect to the phone. But coming back again to what you were mentioning here, the phone is actually our most personal device. And it's becoming even more and more personal. But what could be more personal than your own health? So it feels like it's a little bit of a natural step when we get all this data connected to the phone as well. Maybe it's gathered on the phone, but I'm quite sure that it will be transferred up to the cloud where you have other computings done on that data and shared with others, or you just have pieces of it staying on your phone.
And I wonder, I was last night thinking, I couldn't fall asleep because I'm still like in Auckland time. I flew in from Auckland yesterday, so I'm all messed up time zone wise. And I was thinking about really the connected glanceable watches like that, right? And you're seeing that with MetaWatch and a couple other devices that have tried and are trying and are making good progress there. But I wonder at the same time, is that really just an interim step, right? Do people necessarily want their watch to talk to their phone, or is that out of necessity because the phone is the only thing that actually has the connectivity to the internet? In other words, if we fast forward another 2 to 5 years where the watch itself is connected to the internet in an always-on fashion, similar to a Kindle 3G or something like that, where I don't have to think about how this device connects to my phone because it doesn't matter anymore. It's just connecting to the cloud because it's all the same data behind the scenes. I'd be curious where you think that direction is going, maybe even from Ian, your perspective as a device manufacturer. Do you foresee at some point down the line that device is simply streaming that data in real time right to the cloud as opposed to routing through a phone and then connecting out?
I mean, you have to solve quite a few different problems if you want this to be, essentially you're saying that you see this more as a phone. But then you're missing out on the big screen. Everybody wants to have the big screens to digest and consume a lot of data as well. So, and also you don't want, how much memory can you put in this one? And the battery life, now the phones are going bigger, but also the batteries, because they need to last longer since they have to run these big screens and all the new network technologies, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, everything needs to run. So the solution that was done for smartwatch, it has very little memory in the device actually. So it becomes more like a display for data that is then processed on the phone. So it has a Bluetooth connection, so you just process the data and show the data on your smartwatch. So for instance, we've been working with Endomondo for their fitness application.
And that's, you kind of mentioned something interesting there, which is that you almost have two different market segments for phone use in sport and health, right? You've got the person who may be going out and downloading Runkeeper for free and going for a run because it's free, right? And they're capturing that data that way. And then you have somebody who's willing to drop $100 to $300 or more on a device that captures that data, right? And then you have somebody that wants to integrate those devices together. Where do you see kind of going forward, though, that those devices start to either converge even more? So, for example, there's a few products, and I just looked at one downstairs, also one by the Garmin, the GTU10, that transmits data in real time. I know we were talking beforehand about some more health devices that do the same thing, right? So that for folks that may not want to have the phone on all the time, for example, if you're in a race or if you're elderly and you just may not be comfortable having a phone with you, but you're willing to wear a watch because that takes care of the monitoring piece. Where do you see product evolution today going there?
Well, it's certainly feasible to add, say, a cellular module to a blood pressure monitor, a weight scale, something where the battery life is okay. I've got 4 AA's in a blood pressure monitor, 4 AA's in a weight scale, so I can manage that power. But say in a pedometer, am I going to be able to put a cellular module in a pedometer running on a coin cell battery? Not anytime soon, no. Right? So, you have technical challenges that still exist to Kindleize some of these devices. But certainly, I think at some point, in the not too distant future, you will see some of these devices adding cellular capabilities so that, like you said, you don't necessarily have to send data to the phone if you don't want to. It just happens magically. So
looking at putting chips in devices, I think one of the big discussion points over the last few months has been the direction in sport and fitness around AMP Plus or Bluetooth Low Energy or Bluetooth Smart. And I know Mike Wahoo's done a ton of work there in getting the first Bluetooth Low Energy heart rate strap out there today. Where do you see that market going in terms of the next 12 to 18 months as far as how device companies or device sensor companies will choose which technology to use?
That's interesting. I'm a believer that the market's going to get much more fragmented before it starts converging, just because the use cases between home health and sport fitness are so different. On home health, you have 24-hour monitoring, right? You have much different. You look for exceptions versus look for always, for guided data. On the sport fitness, you have 2 or 3 hour monitoring, and you want to know what's going on every single one of those minutes in those 33 hours. So I believe that you're going to start seeing much more specific devices for different use cases. So to go back to your question around how people are going to embrace ANT Plus or Bluetooth Smart, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be a lot richer. So I think that a lot of it is going to be driven by the likes of Sony, Ericsson, and Apple and Google. I think that the mobile phone manufacturers and operating systems are going to have a huge influence on what technologies are going to be part of that, just because there's so many people that want to get the data into their phone, and they see this as this natural computer that's got so much functionality, whether it's capabilities or social networks or whatever it may be. And I think that the phone manufacturers and the phone operating systems are really going to have a huge part of that, a huge input into that decision. That said, ANT Plus has been around for much longer than Bluetooth Smart. There's millions and millions of nodes of ANT Plus out there in the market, and we cannot discount that, because in the sport fitness market, ANT Plus has been prevalent, and even in the home health made some very good inroads as well. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think they're going to be split right down the middle, and you're going to have to be able to support everything, which is going to be tough for a lot of manufacturers. So.
Well, tough. I mean, if we look at it from our perspective, our new phones that we announced here doesn't support BLE today. And one of those reasons are that we're talking a little bit about fragmentation here as well, that we didn't want to fragment the market until Android, through Google, had built in Bluetooth Low Energy into Android. But we also see it's coming into Android products with their proprietary solutions now, which are also, if that really takes off, we of course also are looking at how we can do it. But the goal for us would be to support both BLE and ANT Plus, because there's such a vibrant community around ANT Plus that we now have tapped into through our product. Already in 2010, we started to support it, building up the ecosystem around our phones. And now we see that we have a really good momentum, and all our new phones then support ANT Plus.
Okay, and I've got one final question for Mike. If we want to have any questions, though, I believe there's a microphone there. I know the last session took a couple questions as well. One of the, we talked about Bluetooth Low Energy being so new to the scene, right? And ANT Plus have been there so long, and that devices know how to work with each other, right? And they just, I can virtually guarantee that I can go pick up any ANT Plus device down in the pavilion. It's going to work automatically with any other ANT Plus device that supports it. Whereas we've seen with BLE at this point, it's still a bit young, and that's not really happening, right? When we talk about some of the straps and whatnot aren't actually compatible with other devices that claim compatibility. Where do you see that Bluetooth is going to have to move to be able to make that more seamless?
Yeah, I think that the beautiful of ANT Plus, and the plus for ANT Plus means interoperability. That's what makes it so great. I think Bluetooth in Smart is going to have to go there. I think that the SIG is recognizing that, and they're moving towards that. But also the wild card in this whole situation is Apple, right? Because the way that Apple's implemented Bluetooth Smart is it's kind of the Wild West frontier, where you can do anything with the phone. You can interact in the phone in many different ways, which opens up great gadgets for toys and for different, maybe even medical devices. But I think that it's going to be interesting. But I think eventually, you're seeing it in the heart rate standard. You're seeing it in some of the other Bluetooth Smart standards that have already been published, and they're going to have to go that way.
Okay, right. Thank you. I think we have our first question up there.
Yes, my name is Kenneth from California. I'm an app developer. It's mainly I have an interest on dealing with the data interconnectivities. Yeah, government has their own standard and HIPAA compliance. Yeah, and this is the big system or HL7, like the healthcare application need to deal with. And for the device company, I think they're going to try to get a clear, easy solution to collect their data. but somehow in order to make the most effective outcome for the health or behavioral improvement, probably these two kind of data, like the data from the hospital, from the patient, and the data from the device, which they collect day to day on their exercise, we need to merge together to make it more effective. So what do you guys foresee in the future, how these two kind of device collecting data and the hospital government regulated data will merge together to create a most effective result?
So I think, it's interesting, at least from my perspective, I think Health Vault was one of the first attempts to do that, right? And there's other ones out there, of course. But I wonder if maybe it was just simply too soon for them, right? I sit back and say, if we look 3 to 5 years from now, and hopefully there's nobody from Google in the room, would Google be kicking themselves saying they put that to bed too early, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about there, right? Is taking consumer devices and putting it into a database that medical professionals could access as well as consumers could access. I'd be curious, Chris, from your perspective, in that field a bit, or focus on that field a bit more, what were some of the stumbling blocks from the medical side for that? For basically kind of the failure of that, or why it's not grabbing hold?
For something like a Google or a Health Vault, I think there's a multitude of issues. One was connectivity problems. I mean, how do I get data into Google Health from my weight scale? What do I do with it after that? It's just sitting there. There was really no user interface that would tell me what my data meant. It was just raw data, I believe. And I know that they were trying to pull in pharmacy data. They had partnerships with some of the retail pharmacy chains. And I think one of their visions was you could pull all of your medical data from your hospital, your physician, the pharmacy, your wellness data, and put it all in one place, but it never actually materialized, nor was there this outcry from consumers who wanted to do it.
And that may have been ultimately the biggest downfall, is a lack of reason to get something in there.
Absolutely. Yep.
But shouldn't it then be driven by the hospital organizations instead? Because that's where the data is locked. The other data you can get, I guess.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So if it was driven by them, I think then we would see more as a big service. Then maybe the answer to what your question is.
Just from my perspective, to solve that, it's going to come from the consumer. Because I can tell you right now, the hospitals are making more than enough money. They're happy. They're doing their thing. And unless something drives them to instill change, they're not going to change. Yeah. So when somebody like you goes out and develops an app where someone can sit down, and it's got to take less than like 15 to 20 seconds because the attention span of our society is negligible at this point. Sit down, hit a button, all that data gets put into a device. If enough people started walking into a hospital with that device and said, here's all my data, help me, hospitals are going to have no choice. The demand is there from the consumer. They're going to see a revenue stream. It's a different way for them to make money. They're going to have statistics on how they're helping the patients. It's going to work. But I think what's going to have to happen is it's going to have to be driven from the consumer. And in my opinion, that's what happened with Google. So you have this great cache with all this data that no one knows how to put something in because there's nothing driving the consumer to get there. So I think a lot of that's also going to come from corporations educating the market on how simple this stuff is. Because again, our perspective, that there's so much data and it's so complicated. For most people, it's too intimidating. You design the app where you can have all that health data, enough people latch onto it and start going into those institutions and saying, I have that data, help me with it, they're going to have to respond.
Thank you.